So last night, Sam Seder, the Majority Report, went on MSNBC with Chris Hayes to discuss Joe Biden's interview with Charlamagne the God on The Breakfast Club, and it's pretty good. Sam Seder's really dropping some knowledge there. So let's take a look at that clip, then we'll be back to talk about it.
Well, what I was also struck was by Charlamagne's follow-up, which is I want something material to bring back to my community. And Joe Biden had no answer for that. I mean, he said, I've authorized the Voting Rights Act. Well, I mean, let's be honest. Every single senator in 2006 or 7, I mean, except for maybe 4, and I'm including the vast majority of Republicans, also reauthorized the Voting Rights Act. That's not that should be a baseline, never mind for a Democratic senator, any senator for that matter. And so the fact that he couldn't respond with, well, I'm glad I know you want stuff for your community, and here's some of the ideas that I have to bring you some material benefits. So, I mean, I agree with Zerlina. I think we should have a vice president, a woman of color. But I would also like to see that vice president, woman of color, offer and bring to the ticket some plans and some proactive measures to bring material benefit to people. I mean, I think that's hugely important. And I think that's got overshadowed at the end of his question.
So there you go, Sam Seder out there dropping some knowledge bombs as always, and Sam is really right to hone in onto what Charlamagne is actually asking, because if you go through it and listen, Charlamagne isn't saying, oh, I don't know, maybe Trump, maybe Biden, I don't know. No, Charlamagne is saying, I want tangibles. Give me something I can hold on to that I can bring back to my community and say, look, man, that Biden guy, he's got your back. We can get excited about Joe Biden because he's got these things that he's going to do for us. And one of those things he's asking for some other things too if you go through it and listen. But one of the things he's asking for is he's saying, we want a black woman on the ticket. Why? Because we saved your political career. Your political career would be dead if it wasn't for us. We saved you. You owe us. And one of the things that Charlamagne has been sort of saying, because obviously he's been on a number of interviews since, because this is a viral clip. Everybody wants to interview him, and he's done a few. One of the things that he keeps saying, one of the things he keeps going back to is, look, man, we've seen presidents come and go. We've seen, vice presidents come and go, presidents come and go. But our community, it's still struggling. So Joe Biden, it's not sufficient for you to keep talking about your record. Like a broken record, Joe Biden is out there saying, look at my record, look at my record, look at my record. He's saying, look at the fact I did the Voting Rights Act. And Sam is really right there to point out the Voting Rights Act is the bare minimum. In fact, I would even add to that and say that it's below the bare minimum. There are other things on top of that which still include the bare minimum. And so for Joe Biden to stand on that and say that that means that he's a real champion of the black community. Okay, you can say maybe he was in the past, although, there's also the crime bill, which you need to talk about. There's all kinds of other racist gaffes that Joe Biden has made over the years. But you need to say, what are you going to do into the future? You can't just talk about the past. You have to talk about what things are you going to bring about for change, because our community, Charlamagne says, has been struggling and is still struggling. So you need to make change into the future. In fact, actually, the NAACP came out and made a statement about this, because you'll notice there, you'll remember at the end of what Joe Biden said is one of the things that he said in defense of his record is that the NAACP has endorsed him every single time he's run. And the NAACP has come out to say that that's not true. We have not endorsed Joe Biden, specifically because we don't even make endorsements. So Joe Biden lied about saying that the NAACP had endorsed him every single time when pressed on his record, when actually he wasn't even really being pressed on his record. He was just saying, Charlamagne was just saying, what are you going to do for us in the future? So you can see here, this is the statement from the NAACP about endorsement. Derek Johnson, the president and CEO of the NAACP, made the following comments about the remark from Joe Biden, basically saying, yesterday, the former Vice President Joe Biden made a comment about the NAACP endorsement. We want to clarify that the NAACP is a nonpartisan organization and does not endorse candidates for political office at any level. So no, the NAACP is saying no, we did not endorse Joe Biden. We don't even do endorsements anyway. So it was not true for Joe Biden to say that. And I haven't really heard the Joe Biden campaign clarify this. The Joe Biden campaign did come out, Joe Biden himself actually did come out and apologize for those comments that he made where he said that you're not black unless you vote for him. They did apologize. Personally, in my opinion, I didn't think that it was quite a sufficient apology. You can watch my video when I talked about the last time around, or when I first saw the sort of remarks, my video about that. But I don't think that it was quite a sufficient apology. It wasn't the worst apology that I've ever seen, but I didn't think it was quite a sufficient apology. But Joe Biden did apologize. But anyway, this is actually a really, really big deal and a big problem, quite frankly, for the Joe Biden campaign. Not just the gaffes, but also the nature of the gaffe and the kind of the gaffe that this is, right? And so, one of the things that we're seeing right now is that the Trump campaign is actually running an ad blitz about this sort of stumble here. So you can see here, Trump plans a $1 million ad blitz after Biden's "You Ain't Black" stumble. I would use a different word, but that's what they're saying it here. And so the Joe Biden campaign is launching, or excuse me, the Donald Trump campaign is launching a $1 million ad blitz aimed at capitalizing on Joe Biden's remarks that African American voters ain't black if they are considering voting for Donald Trump. And so, and actually there was a bit of an update. CNN made a sort of update article about that particular reporting, which is that this ad is going to run in two different types. So the first type is going to be sort of a digital ad. It's going to come in two forms. The first one is a video montage centered around Biden's comments, which will run nationally. And then the second ad will focus on Biden's role in the 1994 crime bill, which expanded the federal death penalty and created dramatically harsher sentencing laws, including 3 strikes, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. So you can see there that the Donald Trump campaign is really going to be capitalizing on that. But by the way, the important part here is that this ad, the sort of crime bill ad, will run in specific swing states, which, by the way, another thing to talk about when it comes to the crime bill and when it comes to Joe Biden, you'll remember Hillary Clinton also supported the crime bill last time around. Now, big difference there. Joe Biden was actually the architect of the crime bill, so there's also that to consider. But Hillary Clinton last time around did apologize for the whole entire crime bill, said that it was wrong, and said, look, let me be president and let me sort of make atonements. Let me atone for that by doing these specific things that, if I was president. Now, you can believe her or not believe her, but that was sort of what Hillary Clinton was doing. Now, compare that to what Joe Biden campaign is doing now. Joe Biden isn't apologizing for the crime bill. What he said is, I'm sorry for when it came to sentencing laws, when it came to drug use, and a few details about the crime bill, but he isn't sort of full sail apologizing for the crime bill. At least he hasn't yet. And so it's insufficient, quite frankly, for the massive and drastic harm to the African American community, which the crime bill caused. And Joe Biden isn't really sort of apologizing for that. It seems like, when it comes to the Joe Biden campaign, the only thing that they really seem to apologize for are the kind of gaffes, but they're not really. He hasn't really apologized for his policy mistakes in the past, and that's just something that I'm noticing, and I think that is going to come back. Really come back to haunt him. And the other problem, which is sort of coming out of this, and not this specifically, but the thing that we're sort of seeing is that Joe Biden is really struggling to find enthusiasm among Bernie Sanders supporters. Because here's the thing, according to polls, it's quite possible. I mean, it does seem like Joe Biden is going to get at least the majority of Bernie Sanders supporters to come out, former Bernie Sanders voters to come out and vote for Joe Biden. But what's clear is that Joe Biden is not getting their enthusiasm. Joe Biden is not getting their donations. Joe Biden is not getting them to come out and phone bank, because you'll remember Bernie Sanders had the most well-run campaign in the race. Bernie Sanders was able to knock I think something like 500,000 doors in Iowa. I mean, it was just unprecedented, the number of doors that Bernie Sanders was able to knock, the amount of enthusiasm, the kind of phone calls, and how, the money that he was able to raise, the grassroots small dollar money that Bernie Sanders was able to raise. And Joe Biden just isn't able to do that. And so this is actually a really big problem for the Joe Biden campaign, because it's not just an issue of enthusiasm in terms of getting people to polls. It's also an issue of enthusiasm in terms of being able to tap into the small dollar donor base, which Bernie Sanders had. It's also an issue of being able to tap into that kind of phone banking base, which Bernie Sanders had, where Bernie Sanders had hundreds of thousands of volunteers, just people across the country phone banking for him. And Joe Biden isn't able to tap into that. You can see here this specific number coming out of this, that only 3% of Bernie Sanders supporters have donated to Joe Biden's campaign. 3%. That is an unbelievably small number. 3%. That's tiny. And I'll tell you, I definitely haven't voted or haven't donated to the Joe Biden campaign. I definitely haven't. And so for Joe Biden to have that kind of massive deficit, and these comments coming out on top of it, these racist comments, as I said in my last video, and I still believe that those comments were racist. It just shows you how Joe Biden is really, really struggling when it comes to bringing out enthusiasm. So not only now is Joe Biden struggling to bring out enthusiasm for progressives, Joe Biden is also struggling to bring out enthusiasm to the African American community. And obviously, those two things are not mutually exclusive. Those two groups are not mutually exclusive. And so Joe Biden really needs to make sure when it comes to his VP pick, he's going to need to make sure that if he wants to have any chance of winning this thing, I mean, look, the polls are doing really, really good right now. And quite frankly, it is Donald Trump's race to lose in that sense. When you got this pandemic, it's all going to, a lot of it is going to come down to, I think, a lot of it's going to come down to Donald Trump's pandemic response, right? But when it comes to this, if Joe Biden really wants to make a competitive run for this thing, Joe Biden is going to need to pick an enthusiastic, an exciting vice president pick, which is going to be able to generate enthusiasm for the African American community, for progressives, for all the different groups, and really bring out and show that Joe Biden is going to be more proactive in bringing about change for the communities who are struggling right now. And that, quite frankly, I'm going to be honest, is going to be hard for a lot of people to believe. This is going to be something which is going to be about being able to convince voters that Joe Biden isn't lying in the same way that he lied when it came to the NAACP, that Joe Biden is telling the truth, that he is going to be bringing about change. And that's going to be a hard sell for Joe Biden to make given his record. Anyway, that's just my opinion about it. You can let me know what you think about it down in the comment section below. But for now, if you did like this video, I'd appreciate it if you hit the like button and consider subscribing. Thanks.